wrong. That age has to be over. That part of our history has to be put behind us. We need every officer to take responsibility if they see another officer doing something wrong. And that's what the second officer did yesterday, and I commend him for it. Now, this weekend, we also saw real challenges out in our streets in terms of gun violence. And this is something we all have to focus on, and I know the NYPD is focused on it. We have to address a troubling trend we've seen in terms of shootings over the last weeks. 8 shooting incidents Friday, 18 on Saturday, which is particularly troubling. 2 yesterday based on the information we have already. What's going on? Well, we know in the warmer months, unfortunately, historically, there have been more shootings. That's not something we accept, but it's something we understand and we have to fight against. We know there's some impact from what's happened over the months and months with the coronavirus. We know that there's instances where there's retaliation between one gang and another. We understand these things, but the fact we understand it doesn't make us any less, give us any less sense of urgency in addressing it. Particular problems have been showing up in the Bronx and in Brooklyn North. We're going to be addressing them. NYPD is immediately using its capacity to go at these problems. A couple of different pieces. First of all, Summer All Out. This is an initiative we announced a few weeks back. Hundreds more officers out on the streets, away from desk jobs, out to the streets so they can be on the front line addressing gun violence. You'll see increased car patrols and foot patrols in areas that need them. And you'll see a moving of resources amongst precincts and commands to address where the problem is greatest. We're also going to lean in. Another crucial part of our strategy, we've talked about this in recent weeks, is leaning into the Cure Violence movement and the crisis management system. This is a powerful, powerful reality. Community-based leaders, community members who stop violence before it happens, who intervene, stop retaliations, mediate conflicts. Look, where Cure Violence is strong, where the movement is strong, you see the results. And one example that's powerful, the sites that are part of the mayor's action plan, which has been up and running for years, did not see an increase in gun violence over the last week. This is part of why we put the additional $10 million. A couple weeks back, we put $10 million additionally into the crisis management system and the Cure Violence movement. It will now cover 20 key precincts in New York City where most of the gun violence is. And we're going to keep expanding that work. This summer, you'll be seeing the Cure Violence movement, the crisis management system, hiring more and more community residents to do this anti-violence work. And I think that'll be another crucial part of the strategy. So the bottom line here is we are not going to allow gun violence to continue to grow in this city. We're not going to go back to the days where there was so much violence pervading our communities. We're going to use new strategies and approaches in policing, new strategies and approaches at the community level. We're going to do whatever it takes to fight back gun violence, but we're going to do it in a way that emphasizes fairness, that emphasizes the relationship between police and community, the partnership we need. We're not going back to the bad old days when there was so much violence in the city, nor are we going back to the bad old days where policing was done the wrong way. And in too many cases, police and community could never connect and find that mutual respect. In fact, that mutual respect is the way forward, and that's what we will be achieving in the weeks and months and years ahead in this city. Now, having said that, I want to go back to what this day means for this city as we take a huge step forward with the beginning of phase 2 of the restart of New York City. Look, it is so important to say up front, it's happening because of you. It's happening because of all the hard work all of you did. But now you see on your screen all of the types of stores, all of the parts of our lives that are now coming back to life. I know a lot of us are excited about seeing the stores in our neighborhoods. We love reopening. Barbershops and hair salons reopening. Restaurants, of course, so much going on that really, really will help us come out of this crisis and move forward, get people back their livelihood. Look, phase 1 was a big deal, but phase 2 is really a giant step for this city. This is where most of our economy is. So we believe that today you're going to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 to 300,000 people start to come back to work. And again, the guidance has been out there now from the city, from the state, how to do it the right way. Some people are going to do it immediately. Some businesses are going to open up immediately. Some folks are going to come back to work immediately. Others will take their time. Some are going to watch and see how it goes. But what we know is, and we saw it in phase one, every passing day, more and more people say, hey, this is working. I want to be a part of it. So to keep moving forward, it can't be business as usual. If we're going to help these businesses come back, we have to be there for them. We have to give out the free face coverings, now over 2 million face coverings that have been given out. And we're doubling it and adding 2 million more for free for small businesses to help them move forward. Any business that needs guidance, they can reach out to the good people at the Department of Small Business Services. And I want to commend Commissioner Janelle Doris and his whole team. They've been doing a great job supporting our small businesses. Sector guides available at nyc.gov/business to tell you how to restart if there's any questions, and more importantly, a human being who can help you by calling 888-SBS-4NYC. Any questions or concerns about how to reopen, that's where you can get live help from a person who knows how to guide you. Now, I don't know about you, but I think the reopening of our restaurants is such an important part of this day, and this is so much the identity in New York City. And I am so proud of the restaurant owners, the bar owners, the cafe owners who fought their way through this and now are ready to come back strong and be a part of their communities. And we need them. They're so much a part of who we are as New Yorkers. So this is a very exciting day to have them coming back. Outdoor dining as part of our Open Restaurants initiative, you'll be seeing popping up all over the city. The important thing, of course, is to do it the right way, do it safely. But I think from talking to a lot of restaurant owners, they know the right way to do it. They want to do it the right way. They want to honor their customers and their workers, but they're ready to come back. And here's some evidence. We put the application for the open restaurants so that restaurants could use sidewalk space, curb space to put in tables. We put that up on Friday morning. Since then, 3,192 restaurants have applied. They have instantly qualified. They are self-certified. They are good to go today. And I want to commend everyone at the Department of Transportation and Small Business Services for moving that initiative so quickly. So any restaurant that wants to take advantage of that space and open up more outdoor seating, go to nyc.gov/open restaurants, self-certify. It takes a few minutes and you are good to go. So that says something about how easy it will be, thank God, for these key parts of our communities to come back. But the question you might ask is, do we know if people are going to want to engage in phase two? Do we know if people are going to want to come back to work, go back to restaurants, go to barbershops? Do we think it's going to actually start up again? And here's what we know, because we've been watching some of the indicators that tell us how much people are re-engaging. Subway ridership. Compared to the Thursday before phase one, just a few weeks ago, this past Thursday had subway ridership up 29%. Getting close to the point of 1 million subway riders per day. Bus ridership over the same period, 22% up. Staten Island ferry ridership up 31%. You're seeing people come back to mass transit, and that is our future. That's crucial. You're also seeing more traffic on the bridges. East River Bridges up 24%, Harlem River Bridges up 10%. So something's happening. And part of why I think people are engaging mass transit is because there's been a real effort to keep it safe, to create the markings to show you where to stand, where to sit, the free face coverings, a lot of cleaning. I want to thank the MTA for their efforts. I want to thank everyone at the Staten Island Ferry for their great work. People are seeing that safety and health are being taken seriously, and they're responding to it. And that's what matters. People understand that they can come back in a safe and smart fashion. Now, the other fact is that we've seen over these weeks some really good, consistent evidence, data, real, tangible, objective data showing that we continue to move in the right direction health-wise. And that's because of all your hard work. That's because the people opening up the businesses are doing it the right way. That's because we're educating businesses, workers, telling people how to protect themselves, helping them do it. But it's also because we have a new powerful element in this fight, and that's the test and trace core. This is a game changer. Remember, we didn't used to have this on a massive scale, nor did other cities and states around the country. Now we are doing the thing that has worked in so many other parts of the world. We're proactively reaching people who test positive or people who are symptomatic and need help and we're making sure that they get the help they need so they can safely separate, and it will inhibit the spread of the disease. So really, really crucial new factor and a lot of great initial progress. Here to give you an update, I want to thank him and his whole team, the Executive Director of the Test and Trace Corps, Dr. Ted Long. Ted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an unprecedented time. In our lifetimes, we have never seen a disease as widespread and deadly as the coronavirus. Therefore, we've never had to set up a contact tracing operation of this magnitude before in our history. Now, what we've done so far over the last 3 weeks is essentially created and built a new organization with thousands of employees, a complex training system, a complex management structure, and a complex IT infrastructure that ensures privacy and confidentiality at every turn. It is now up and running, and I'm going to share with you some of the initial results today that take us through the first 3 weeks. I want to really focus in on 3 key points, though, as I go into this. The first is that for all cases or people newly diagnosed with the coronavirus, we don't have phone numbers for all of them. But for those that we do, we've been able to reach 97% of them by phone. That's to be compared to Louisiana, that reached 48% of the people that they called, and Boston, that reached 60% of the people that they called. The fact that we've been able to reach 97% of people newly diagnosed with coronavirus that we have a phone number for shows the program is working. Now, the next statistic I want to share with you is how we're doing getting contacts from our cases. Among our cases that complete our interview, meaning ones that we've asked about whether they have contacts, 74% to date have shared contacts with us. In the last week alone, week 3, 86% of our cases, people newly diagnosed with coronavirus that got through our interview, gave us contacts, 86%. Now, we believe in the Test and Trace Corps that the reason that 86% of people in the past week that when asked gave us contacts is because more than half of our tracers are people from our hardest hit communities across New York City. They understand our communities, and our communities therefore trust them. And it's based on that trust that 86% of the time, cases when asked for contacts when they completed the interview gave contacts. The third statistic I want to share with you today is that of the contacts or people that were exposed to the coronavirus that we then called, there was a group of more than 650 of them that by the time we called them were actively symptomatic and likely contagious. This means that this group of 650 New Yorkers, if we did nothing, if the program did not exist, they may go out and infect 3 more New Yorkers each. Because in that moment when we were speaking to them, we were able to intervene to get them to isolate, to quarantine, to keep their families and their neighbors safe, and to give them all of the resources to do that. We've potentially already prevented in the first 3 weeks alone of the program up to 2,000 new cases of the coronavirus to keep New York City safe. I'm now going to go through the rest of the data. So in the last 3 weeks to date, we've identified more than 7,500 new cases of the coronavirus. Among those, 85% we had a phone number for, and when we called them, we were able to get through or reach 97% of them. There was a group of 2,808 of those cases that gave us contacts. That group of 2,808 are the people that completed the interviews and represent 74% of the people that completed our interviews where we gave them the chance to give us contacts. And I want to draw out the point here that this is better than it was in the first 2 weeks of the program. In the first 2 weeks of the program, 69% of cases that completed our interviews were giving us contacts. Now, in the last week alone, it was jumped up to 86% of the cases we talked to gave us contacts. What we think that means is that people are beginning to more and more trust the Test and Trace Corps because the Corps is us. It is our own people from our own communities calling our own communities. And again, the fact that 86% of cases are giving contacts to the people they're talking to on the phone, we think shows that there is that trust that's being built there. In terms of contacts, we now have more than 6,600 contacts that we've generated. Of those, We have a phone number for 77% of them, which if you look back at the data we shared last week is a substantial improvement. Of those, we've reached 89% of all of those contacts. And again, if you look back at the data from last week, that's also a substantial improvement. I talked to you about the number of more than 650 New Yorkers were already symptomatic and contagious by the time we called them. We were able to intervene and help. To date, we've been monitoring 6,400 New Yorkers. Of those, 2,000 have told us that in order for them to stay home to keep their families and their neighbors safe, they needed help. And we've been able to, 2,065 times, offer them that help. That help can come in the form of food delivery, help with getting their medications delivered, even help with eviction notices or with their jobs. Our resource navigators stand at the ready to help New Yorkers, and this has been a key way that we've been able to help New Yorkers to stay at home to prevent disease spread. In addition to that, 63 New Yorkers have stayed at our hotels to date as well. With that, I'll pass it back to the mayor.
Thank you, Ted. Really appreciate the update. And again, thanks to you and all your colleagues for the hard work you're doing. Now let's go over today's daily indicators. I'm going to add an interesting fact as I do it. First of all, indicator number one, daily number of people admitted to hospitals for suspected COVID-19. The threshold is 200. Today's report, 56 patients. Let me just let you know, because several members of the media have asked a question, and I asked it myself internally, and I commend them for raising this point. The question is, what was the actual percentage, number of people who came into our hospitals with suspected COVID-19, meaning they had pneumonia-like symptoms, respiratory symptoms? When they actually were tested, even if it took a few days to get the results, what was the percentage that actually did have COVID? Well, very interesting. You go back to that horrible date that we used to talk about, April 5th, a day that was really looking like this crisis was going to get even worse. On April 5th, 80% of folks who were in our hospitals and were suspected COVID patients turned out to be actual COVID patients when the test results came back. The last read we have is from June 14th. At that point, it was only 14%. So that's another very positive sign that not only is the number of patients low at this point, but when we actually find out who has COVID and who doesn't, it's a small percentage within the group that does. So that's indicator one. Indicator two, daily number of people in health and hospitals, ICUs, threshold of 375, today's report 326. And the most important indicator, percentage of people tested citywide were positive for COVID-19, threshold of 15%, today's report a very good one, 2%. That is a great way to start phase two. A few words in Spanish. Los neoyorquinos se han ganado su camino hacia la segunda fase en nuestra lucha contra el coronavirus. Hoy es un día histórico. Hoy miles de personas regresan a trabajar y muchos de los negocios que nos gustan abren de nuevo. Tenemos que seguir adelante, fase por fase, para vencer a este virus y crear una ciudad mejor. With that, we'll turn to our colleagues in the media. Please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
Hi all. Just a reminder, we have Small Business Commissioner Doris and Executive Director of the Test and Trace Corps, Dr. Long, here in person. And on the phone, we have Deputy Mayor Bean, Transportation Commissioner Trottenberg, and Senior Advisor Varma on the phone. With that, I will start with Andrew Siff from NBC.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Phase 2. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, indeed. How you doing, Andrew?
Hanging in there. Thanks for asking. My first question has to do with the restaurants reopening. I saw in some neighborhoods the hand-printed signs that restaurants send out. Please don't park here. This is for our curbside business. How concerned are you, and maybe Commissioner Trottenberg has some evidence from it already this morning, how concerned are you that drivers might just rip those down and leave their cars parked there? And are you concerned that this might lead to some confrontations out there?
You know, Andrew, I'll start and I'll turn to the commissioner. Look, we understand New Yorkers are New Yorkers, and parking is very, very precious to us. But I also think people understand this is about bringing back our city, bringing back our economy, bringing back people's jobs, bringing back part of the community that people love. We're giving people with the self-certification a notice they can put up, an official notice from Department of Transportation, making clear that the space is delineated for the restaurant. And most of those spaces, of course, are places where there's a lot of turnover, where there's metered parking. So I think it's an issue, but I believe that the vast majority of people will respect it, and will certainly help restaurants. And Commissioner, why don't you jump in?
Exactly, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Andrew. We are actually in the process today going to be emailing to all the restaurants who applied for curb space, a sort of somewhat official sign which says "Don't park here, open dining." And between SBS and DOT's borough commissioner offices, we're going to be on the ground today helping to resolve those conflicts where we can. But it's probably going to take a little time to sort itself out. So a little patience as we turn those parking spaces into restaurant space.
Go ahead, Andrew.
My second question, and I know this is going to sound like we're getting ahead of ourselves, but my second question has to do with phase 3. All the upstate regions spent only 2 weeks in phase 2 and went on to phase 3. And the governor has repeatedly said the metrics match for every region. No one gets an exception. But have you had any conversations with the governor, or do you plan to essentially say, slow your roll when it comes to phase 3 in the city, because you're talking about an entirely different density level?
You know, Andrew, the bottom line, first of all, is the data is what we all look to. The city, the state, we all are devoted to the data. And today is an important day because seeing the numbers today, as good as they are after we've seen the whole experience of phase 1, is really, really important. We're getting more and more evidence. And I also believe New Yorkers are very devoted to getting it right. There's lots of hype when someone does something wrong, but the vast majority of people are taking this really seriously and being very conscientious. So yeah, 2 weeks is the official minimum, but the state's always been clear, I've always been clear, we're going to judge by the data, and we're going to look at the particular complexities of New York City, which are, you know, the most challenging dynamics anywhere in the state. So I'll hold out hope that we can move through it quickly. But it's going to be based on the data, and it's going to be, of course, a high bar, because to do something here is just affects so many millions of people. We have to get it right.
Next, we have Katie from the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask, I know you addressed the police officer in the 100th precinct. I wanted to know if you think he should be criminally charged, or if should there be further punishment, and then I have a second question.
Thank you, Katie. Look, Katie, I don't get into the work of the DAs. I respect their judgment. What I focus on is the piece that we control, which is the NYPD disciplinary process. I've said I want to see that process move quickly and transparently, and now we have the tremendous benefit of the 50A law being gone and the ability to be transparent. The commissioner acted very quickly yesterday. There will be a process over the next days to determine the next steps on discipline. That's what I think is important here, that the PD process move rapidly, determine what else needs to happen as a consequence of that officer's action, and we move forward that, and we act transparently to let you know what's happening with that. But the DAs will make their own decisions. Go ahead.
And actually, I don't even have a second question. You can go to the next person.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kevin from the Brooklyn Paper.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Kevin. I'm feeling great nostalgia. Brooklyn Paper was a very big part of my life when I was a school board member and a city council member, so good to hear from you.
Thanks for taking my question. A DOT official told the community board last week that the agency is in talks with your office about possibly turning a car lane on the Brooklyn Bridge into a bike lane. I was wondering if you could give your take on this and give us more insight into these talks, and then I have another question as well.
Kevin, I like to be transparent. I have not heard that previously. Commissioner Trottenberg can speak to it now. I mean, I would state the obvious, that we're seeing a lot more traffic. In fact, I have been struck, as probably a lot of people watching have been, that I've experienced some traffic jams lately. That was something we did not experience in the beginning of this crisis. In a funny way, it's reassuring to be in a traffic jam again, but again, the future has got to be not about automobiles, but about mass transit. But the Brooklyn Bridge that one's a sensitive one, because it's such a crucial artery. So I had not heard that. I'm not sure how workable that is, but Commissioner Trottenberg, what do you say?
Yeah, and Kevin, I will just say, somehow I think between maybe what the staffer said and what was in that article, it wasn't quite accurate. It said that DOT, we had completed our study of looking at whether the promenade on the bridge could accommodate more space for bikes. We haven't, so just that part isn't true. It has been sort of a long-standing question for the East River bridges, which are certainly, particularly the Brooklyn and the Queensboro, pinch points for cycling in and out of Manhattan, about whether we can take a look at traffic lanes. It's something the agencies look at. To be fair to the mayor, I don't think the discussion has made it to his level yet.
Okay, do you have another question, Kevin?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, Commissioner. I just used what your staffer said at the meeting. But to my other question, I've heard from dog owners that they're upset that dog runs aren't reopening as part of phase 2. With most of parks reopening at this point, why are dog runs not reopening? Is that an oversight, or is there some additional considerations for those parts of parks?
There's additional considerations, Kevin. It's a great question. So let's be clear. Parks have been open throughout. I want to just really get this right. Parks have been open. Playgrounds, dog runs, sports facilities got shut down. What we've said now is that the playgrounds with the playground equipment for kids, particularly younger kids, that's reopening today. We have a whole host of other things that we're evaluating right now. We're evaluating them all together. Basketball courts, soccer fields, tennis courts, handball courts, dog runs, you name it. We're looking at all of them. And I think the fact is that they all tend to have a lot of people congregating in a small space. And it tends to be not just kids, but adults, obviously, generally. And we want to, or older kids. We want to get it right. We're trying to figure out what's going to be necessary to make it right, make it workable. And that's what we're working on right now. We'll have more to say on that in the coming days.
Next, we have Michael from the Daily News.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, Michael, how you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I just had one question. The council speaker last week talked about, at the end of the stated meeting, the council putting out its own budget separate and apart from the executive budget, from your budget. And I'm not sure about, all the ins and outs of this, but, he talked about how this was its charter mandated authority. It could do this. I think this has happened at least once before, maybe in '99. But I was wondering if you could talk about, the likelihood or the possibility of that happening and what the implications of that are, and kind of, do you see it as a negotiating tactic, or do you see it as something real that is in the offing at this point?
Yeah, Michael, I don't speculate on other people's words. The bottom line is we have a lot to work through. It's an incredibly difficult budget because we're in the middle of such, crisis wrapped in crisis, including a huge fiscal crisis. But everyone's been working incessantly over the last few weeks. I know our budget teams are constantly speaking with each other. I think there's been real progress, but I think there's a lot to work through. So the history says that we always manage to find common ground with the city council, and that's what I'll assume here. We continue to have negotiations, I think, in a spirit of goodwill.
Michael, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Rich from WCBS 880.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Rich, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. So I just wondered, do you plan to dine outdoors tonight? And if so, where?
1, absolutely. 2, we're deciding the location. We'll let you know later on. But the world of New York restaurants is very, very personally important to me. And I'm very excited that this day has come. I'm very excited for these folks who have put their whole lives into their restaurants. It's just so much a part of life of the city, but it's something that gives me a tremendous amount of joy. So Charlene and I will be out there, but we're working out where. Do you have a follow-up?
I do. Not a follow-up, but another question. Have you ever stood and taken a look at the Theodore Roosevelt statue out in front on Central Park West there? And if so, what went through your mind, and how do you feel about its removal?
Yeah, I have looked at it, Rich, and I think Roosevelt himself is another one of these complex figures in American history. He did some extraordinarily progressive things that we feel to this day, and he did some things that I think are deeply troubling. But I think there's a separate question between him, the person, and the actual statue. The statue has representations that clearly do not represent today's values. The statue clearly, presents a white man as superior to people of color. And that's just not acceptable in this day and age. And it never should have been acceptable. So I know the museum feels it's best to take it down. I support that decision. I think, they felt that's what was right for them as a museum. And I understand why they're doing it, and I respect it.
Next, we have Marcia from CBS.
Mr. Mayor, you talked at the beginning of your remarks about the increase in shootings, which was astounding over the last several days. But there's been basically an increase in shootings since January. And I wonder if you can tell us what role this increase in shootings will play in your thinking about budget cuts to the NYPD.
Yeah, Marcia, it's a very important question. So you're right, Marcia. In the beginning of the year, we saw an uptick in crime and shootings. We saw some leveling off for a few months in the beginning of the coronavirus crisis. Now we've seen something very troubling in recent weeks. To me, I am feeling this distinctly. I'm very, very concerned about how many shootings we're seeing. And I'm feeling it from the perspective of our communities. This means we know when there's shootings, they beget more shootings. We understand retaliation, we understand gang dynamics. And I've heard from a lot of community leaders that they're increasingly concerned. So as we try to make sense of all the important issues that have to be addressed in this budget, I think, Marcia, it's really important to remember, job one is always to keep people safe. And we can do that while creating reform and creating a better NYPD and a fairer NYPD and a different relationship between NYPD and community. But job one is always to keep people safe.
My follow-up question also has to do with the police. The department seems to be concerned about not canceling the police cadet class coming in, the new class, because they say that they're expecting an increase in attrition for various reasons, and that the new police class would be bringing in more police officers who would be from the community, minorities, and people who would represent the communities of New York City. And they're anxious to make sure that they increase that number of people in the NYPD, but also to make up for the loss through attrition. I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Marcia, another very important question. I thank you for it. Look, we had to delay a class of our recruits because of the coronavirus. It's a really important question, what we want to do next and need to do next as a city. This is absolutely a part of the discussion with the City Council as we prepare the budget. You're absolutely right, Marcia. The NYPD today, and I think a lot of people don't know this, today's NYPD is majority people of color. Today's NYPD is increasingly New York City residents. I think a lot of people who've hoped for a different and better kind of policing have wanted to see more representation from communities in the NYPD, have wanted to see more people actually live in the same borough or the same general part of the borough, patrolling the streets and having that sense of investment and connection to the people. That's actually been happening more and more in recent years. So you're absolutely right that any time we don't bring in a new recruit class, we're actually slowing down that progress. But we have to look at all of the factors here, Marcia. We have to figure out, again, safety first, and then how do we deal with these extraordinarily difficult fiscal dynamics that are going to affect every single agency. I want to emphasize that. If we do not get borrowing authority from Albany in the coming days, if we do not get a stimulus from Washington, which unfortunately looks like a foregone conclusion that we won't, every single city agency will experience some kind of cut here. And so it's going to affect everyone. But in the case of the NYPD, as we sort that out, as we also try and figure out the right reforms to make to address the need for more fairness and justice, we have to start from the position of what will keep people safe. And that's a complex decision. That's what we have to work out over the course of the next week or so.
Last two for today. Next, we have Sydney from the Staten Island Advance.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. So an assistant principal on Staten Island from New Dorp High School is under investigation for allegedly citing racist stereotypes about people living in public housing and on government assistance. I'm wondering if you've seen her remarks and if you think she should be removed. And I have a second question.
Sure. Sydney, I have not seen the remarks. I'm very concerned when I hear anything like that, because no one in a position of authority should use racially insensitive language, especially someone who's an educator and kids look up to. But I don't know the facts, and so I can't comment on the specifics. But go ahead with your next question.
Yeah, I wanted to know who's in charge of enforcing the rules of your open restaurants plan. Is it DOT or the sheriff's office? And is there a new tip line to report restaurants not following the rules? And can restaurants open for outdoor dining on both sides of the restaurant or only in front, or and can they open on the street? On Staten Island, we've seen corner restaurants set up outdoor dining on the front and sides of the restaurants and put up barricades on the street to block off traffic. So wondering what's allowed and who's in charge of enforcing the rules.
Sure, excellent question. So, Sydney, I'll start very broadly, and I'm going to pass to Commissioner Trottenberg and Commissioner Doris. Okay, so first of all, remember, we're in a crisis. We need to get our economy back. We need to get people's livelihood back. We are trusting people very much with this approach. We're trusting the restaurant owners to self-certify. We're trusting the people of this city to do the right thing to keep each other safe. And overwhelmingly, that trust has been rewarded time and time again in this crisis. People are doing the right thing. There'll always be some people who take advantage, and we'll deal with that. But it is, to begin with, based on the positive, not the negative. In terms of the frontage you can use, and in terms of how to address any problems, the commissioners will speak to that. Obviously, anybody who thinks they see something dangerous or unhealthy can always call 311, because we want those reports we want to act on right away. But we're starting from the perspective of we do not anticipate a lot of enforcement. We do not anticipate a lot of need to go in aggressively, because we think most people are going to do this the right way. Commissioner Trottenberg, Commissioner Doris, you want to add?
I'll jump in. You're right, Mr. Mayor. The primary source for complaints is going to be 311, and the different agencies have worked with 311, and the complaints will be routed to whichever agency it makes the most sense. If it's an issue you raise about how much space a restaurant's allowed to have on the street or the sidewalk, that would be DOT. Other types of enforcement could go to PD. But we are very much hoping, as the mayor said, to use education and really work with restaurants, the Hospitality Association, local bids, and SBS is at the forefront of that educational process.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Commissioner?
Yeah, so I'll just add, as Commissioner Trottenberg said, we are ensuring that we reach out to our restaurants and small businesses. Our hotline is the best way to get us clarity on some of these matters, but also to proactively ask questions to help you navigate the process. Again, it's 888-727-4692. And we also have webinars and training for our restaurant owners. I was out in Jackson Heights this weekend speaking with the Latino Restaurant Association, and many of those restaurants, as we talked to them, wanted this clarification and was utilizing our services, and was also extremely happy with the 5 to 10 minutes it took for them to actually sign up for this. So a lot of that was because of the education, and we will continue to do that. Our hope is that we have a complaint-driven process in which we're not going out and driving, violations and complaints and so forth from these businesses, but we want to make sure that we train them and let them know what's happening. And so we're here for you. If you're a small business out there, a restaurant, you still need help, please reach out to our hotline. We'll be happy to assist.
And again, the more memorable version of the hotline, 888-SBS-4NYC, 888-SBS-4NYC. Okay, go ahead.
Last question for today. We have Jen Peltz from AP.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Good, Jen. How you doing?
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. One is concerning the reopening. As I'm sure you know, that a lot of the big employers and offices are not yet planning to bring back their workforces, or even a small number of them. What do you think that means for the overall health of the city's business climate, since a lot of smaller businesses depend on their big office neighbors?
Yeah, Jen, it's a great question. I think what you're going to see is evolution. I've talked to a lot of business owners, big and small, and what people are saying is, even though remote offers certain, advantages or continuity, it's not the same thing. It's not as good in many ways. And the fact is, right now, as we're making sure we go through each phase safely, a lot of folks still want to be remote, that's fine. But as we get toward the fall, I'm certainly going to be encouraging people to start coming back more in person. The fact is, yeah, you're right. A lot of small businesses, a lot of restaurants, so many different parts of our economy depend on people coming back to those office jobs. So I think it'll be like this. There'll be some hesitation at first. There'll be some watchful waiting. People wanting to make sure it really works. People want to make sure they're comfortable with it. The economy will start to come back. And the more that people see it's working, the more that people will want to come back. I also think a lot of businesses will say, hey, we just cannot get done this work as well if people don't spend more time together. And you'll see more and more businesses saying, hey, it's time to come back, or at least come back more often. So it'll be stages. I think the summer will be slower. I think the fall is when you're going to see much more ramp up. Go ahead.
Thanks. And my second question has to do with the events in the Rockaway over the weekend.
Say it again, Jen, I'm sorry.
My second question has to do with the incident in the Rockaway Boardwalk over the weekend, the arrest. I did hear you on the importance of the disciplinary action that was taken and quickly. But considering that this all came about just days after legislation on chokeholds, which were already banned by the department, what do you think this says about the bigger issue of eradicating the problem, not just disciplining it when it happens?
Jen, I think, look, we got to understand, in my view, that changing our society, changing our workforce, this is incessant work. Chokehold's been banned for a generation. And when someone uses it, that's unacceptable. And what we now see is very, very fast action to address it. Two things happened in this incident we did not see enough in the past. Very fast, immediate disciplinary action, the suspension within hours, and the beginning of the larger disciplinary process. And we saw another officer intervene. And that represents the best of our police, not letting something like that happen. I have no idea why that officer engaged in what appeared to be a chokehold after everyone in the world knows chokeholds are banned. I have no idea why. It's not acceptable. But the other officer did something to stop it quickly. And that's important, because the way forward is for people now to step up. The vast majority of good police officers to say, hey, that's not right, don't do that. And so I understand how frustrating it is after all the dialogue, all the focus that how could this possibly happen again? But I also choose to focus on the things that make clear what the future will bring. The future will be officers stepping forward and stopping the bad things from happening and standing up and living up to their oath. And I have a lot of faith that our officers will do that. And the department acting swiftly and transparently to discipline any officer who does the wrong thing. And I think that will really help to start change the culture that we need to change in the NYPD. With that, everyone, this again, a very important day, a historic day. I'll finish with a simple thought. So it's June 22nd. We never could have gotten to phase 2 without you. We could never have gotten here if people had not done so much hard work so consistently. And it took immense discipline and strength for New Yorkers to get us here. There was many a day where it looked like it might not be possible, but you achieved this victory. The simple message is this: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You're doing the right thing, stick with it. All of the precautions you're taking, all of the hard work, it's going to get us to the next phase and the next phase. It's going to get us back to being the city that we need to be. So thank you to all the New Yorkers who made this possible, and now let's go take the next big step. Thank you.
Well, you've been listening to Mayor de Blasio delivering his daily coronavirus briefing as New York enters phase 2 of reopening. Phase 2 means that people can begin eating outside and shopping indoors. Barbershops and some salons will be open by appointment only, and real estate firms can also reopen. Now, when it comes to outdoor dining, the mayor says that nearly 3,200 restaurants have submitted applications for curb and street side dining. Phase 2 also means that 300,000 additional New Yorkers may return to work. The mayor says ridership on mass transit is up significantly over the past week. You can see that subway ridership is up 29% and bus ridership is up 21%.
I know a lot of us are excited about seeing the stores in our neighborhoods. We love reopening. Barbershops and hair salons reopening. Restaurants, of course, so much going on that really will help us come out of this crisis and move forward, get people back their livelihood. Look, phase 1 was a big deal, but phase 2 is really a giant step for this city. This is where most of our economy is.
Well, one more note. The mayor addressed the video of an NYPD officer putting a man in an apparent chokehold yesterday in Queens. The mayor called the video unacceptable, but praised the police commissioner for immediately suspending the officer. Now, we will have coverage coming up on Eyewitness News at noon. Now return to the Tamron Hall Show.
Wants to see a Marshall Plan for climate change, jobs, housing, and education in a district that needs new